Um, anyway, okay, all right. Hope that helps you. Um, we can't just be passive in relationships. There's give and take. You've got to participate. Okay. Some individuals who believe that what they thought and intended autonomously were assigned to a particular community, and they were cut off from communication with those neighbors to whom their thoughts usually spread and were held where they were. Excuse me. Then they were told to think differently from the way the spirits of that community were thinking, to force themselves to think along contradictory lines, but they admitted that it was impossible for them. This has happened to any number of people, including Leibniz. Even he was convicted that no one thinks independently, only from others, who in turn are not thinking independently. We are all thinking as a result of an inflow from heaven, and heaven depends on the inflow from the Lord. Some people who have thought deeply about this have declared that it is so stunningly that hardly anyone could be compelled to believe it. It is so contrary to the way things seem. However, they could not deny it because it had been fully demonstrated. Still, in their wonderment, they claimed that it meant that they were not to blame for thinking evil, and that it seemed as though evil came from the Lord. They did not understand how the Lord alone could work things out so that we all think differently either. These three issues need to be unfolded next. I need to add the following to the experiences already cited. When the Lord first allowed me to talk with spirits and angels, the secret was immediately made known to me. I was told from heaven that, like others, I believed that I was thinking and intending on my own, when in fact nothing was coming from me. If it was good, it was coming from the Lord. If it was bad, it was coming from hell. I was shown this at first hand by having various thoughts and desires imposed on me so that eventually I could feel and sense it. So later, as soon as anything evil was impinged on my volition or anything false on my thoughts, I asked where it was coming from, and it was shown. I was also allowed to talk with the people it came from, to rebuke them and to make them go away. This meant that they took their evil and falsity back, kept it to themselves, no longer instilling anything of the sort into my thoughts. This has happened thousands of times. I have been in this state now for a number of years, and still am to this present time. Nevertheless, I seem to myself to be thinking and intending on my own, just like everyone else, with no difference at all. It seems like this to everyone because of the Lord's divine providence, or God's rule, okay, as explained at the appropriate point above. Some newly arrived spirits were bewildered by my state. It looked to them exactly as though I was not thinking or intending anything on my own, that I was therefore like something empty. However, I explained the mystery to them. I added that I was thinking more deeply and sensing what was flowing into my more outward thinking, seeing whether it was coming from heaven or hell, rejecting the one and accepting the other. It still seemed to me, though, I was thinking and intending on my own just like them. It is not entirely unknown in this world that everything good comes from heaven and everything evil from hell. Everyone in the church knows it. Is there anyone who has been ordained in the ministry who does not teach that everything good comes from God and that we cannot gain anything that is not given us from heaven? Ministers teach also that the devil puts evil into our thoughts and leads us astray by prompting us to do them. So the ministers who believe they are preaching with holy zeal pray that the Holy Spirit will teach them and guide their thoughts and their speech. Some of them say that they have a sense of being led. When their sermons are praised, they answer devoutly that they have not been speaking from their own resources, but from God. So too, when they see people speaking and behaving well, they describe them as being led by God. And conversely, when they see people speaking and behaving badly, they describe them as being led by the devil. Anyone knows that this is how people talk in church, but who really believes it, right? Everything we think and intend, and therefore everything that we say and do, flows in from the only fount of life. Yet that one fount of life, the Lord, is not the cause of our thinking things that are evil and false. There are enlightening parallels to the physical world. Warmth and light radiate from its sun. These two flow into all subjects and objects that we see with our eyes, not only good subjects and beautiful objects, but also bad subjects and ugly objects. They bring forth different effects in each. They flow not only into the trees that bear good fruit, but into trees that bear bad fruit, flowing into the actual fruit itself and helping it to develop. They flow into good seed and into the weeds, into useful, healthful shrubs and into harmful, toxic shrubs. Yet it is the same warmth and same light. There is no cause of evil in it, only in the subjects and objects that receive it. The same can be said of the warmth that hatches the eggs of owls or vipers, or eggs of doves and beautiful birds and swans, putting both kinds of egg under a hen and her warmth, which in and of itself is harmless, which will hatch them. What does this warmth have in common with this evil and noxious creatures? The same applies to the warmth that flows into swamps, manure, decay, decomposition, into things that are wine-like, fragrant, sparkling, and alive. Can anyone fail to see that the cause is not the warmth, but in the receptive subject? The very same light, too, makes beautiful colors when it flows into the object, and unpleasant colors when it flows into another. Actually, it displays itself glowing in the bright objects and dimming itself in objects become blacker and darkening itself. The same thing happens in the spiritual world. There are also warmth and light there from its sun, which is the Lord, flowing from him into the objects and subjects. The subjects and objects are subjects and objects. There are angels and spirits. Specifically, their processes of volition and discernment. The warmth there is the radiating divine love, and the light there is irradiating divine wisdom. They are not responsible for the fact that different people receive them differently, for the Lord says, He makes His sun rise in the evil and the good, and sends the rain on the righteous and unrighteous. Matthew 5:45. In its highest spiritual meaning, the sun means divine love and the rain means divine wisdom. I may add that what angels think about volition and intelligence. It is their opinion that none of us has even a grain of volition or prudence that is actually ours. If there were such a grain in anyone, neither heaven nor hell could stand, and the whole human race would perish. The reason they give is that heaven and hell are made up of millions of people. All the peoples who have been born since the creation of the world, heaven and hell are arranged from top to bottom in a design that makes each a unity. Heaven a beautiful person, hell a grotesque person. If there was a single grain of volition or intelligence that belonged to anyone, that unity would not be possible. It would be torn apart, and it would go into the divine form that can stand and endure only if the Lord is absolutely everything, and everything else is absolutely nothing. Another reason they give is that thinking and intending autonomously is divinely itself, while thinking and intending from God is humanity itself. Divinely in itself cannot be claimed by any of us. That would mean that we could be God. Remembering this, if you want to, you'll find it collaborated by angels when you arrive in the spiritual world after you die. Mentioned in 289 above, that when some people were shown convincingly that we do not think on our own, but receive thoughts from others, all of whom in turn are not thinking on their own, but from an inflow from the Lord. In their wonderment, they claimed that it meant that they were not to blame for doing evil, and that it seemed as though evil came from the Lord. They did not understand how the Lord alone could work things out so that we think differently either. Since these three thoughts are bound to occur to people who think about effects as coming solely from the effects and not from the causes, I need to pick these up and look at them in terms of causes. First, it's meant that they were not to blame for doing evil. If everything we think is flowing in from others, it does not seem as though the blame rests on those others as the source. However, the real blame rests on us who accept what is flowing in, since we accept it as our own. That is all we know and all we want to know. We all want to be our own people and find our own way. Particularly, we want to think our own thoughts and make our own decisions. This is the essence of what freedom we enjoy and seem to be our very own. If we knew then what we are thinking and intending was flowing in from someone else, we could feel caught and caged and no longer under our own control. And all the joy would go out of our lives. Eventually, our very humanity would go too. I've often seen this demonstrated when some individuals are allowed to feel and sense that they're being led by others. Their rage blazed up so that they could no longer think straight. They said that they would rather be chained and imprisoned in hell than not allowed to think what they wanted to think and intend what they were thinking. They called this restriction having their life itself bound, which was harsher and more intolerable than being bound physically. They did not say the same about being restrained from anything and doing what they were thinking and intending, because what held them in check was the pleasure of civil and moral life, and this made the restraint easier to bear. Since we do not want to know that others are leading us to think what we think then, but we want to think on our own and believe what we do, it necessarily follows that we ourselves are to blame and cannot avoid that blame as long as we are in love with our own thinking. If we are not in love with our own thinking, though, we extricate ourselves from our engagement with these others. This happens when we realize that something is evil and want therefore to abstain and refrain from it. Then the Lord rescues us from the community that is focused on this evil and moves us to a community that is not. However, if we recognize that something is evil and do not abstain from it, then we are held responsible for it and become guilty of that evil. Whatever we believe we are doing autonomously, then, is said to come from us and not from the Lord. Second, it is therefore seemed as though evil came from the Lord. This can seem though it follows from what I said in 288, namely that in hell, the goodness that flows in from the Lord is turned into evil and the truth into falsity. Surely though, anyone can see that evil and falsity do not come from what is good and true, therefore from the Lord. They come from the receiving subject or object that is focused on what is evil and false, and that distorts and inverts what is being received or receiving. It has been amply demonstrated above in 292, and I have already explained several times how evil and falsity in us originates. We have been experiments in this. There have been experiments in the spiritual world with people who believe that the Lord could take evils out of evil people and replace them with good qualities, thereby taking all hell into heaven and saving everyone. You may see that this is impossible, though at the end of the book, where I deal with instant salvation and direct mercy, the Lord's divine love is infinite, and his divine wisdom is infinite, and infinite forms of love and infinite forms of wisdom radiate from the Lord and flow into everyone in heaven and everyone in hell. Oh,